Hello, everyone. This is a recording for Biology 142, a recording that includes the end of chapter 21 and the beginning of chapter 22. On March 5th, you had a full day lab. We had no lecture, so this recording is to replace the missed lecture, and now we're going to be returned to our regular scheduling after this catch up. This is all the consequence of the snow days. So I'm going to go to screen sharing, and I'll be talking about this recording in lecture over the weekend. Before you come to lecture on Monday, please listen to this, especially the immune system chapter will be relevant to what we talk about in that future lecture. And also, when you prepare for chapter quizzes, the end of chapter 21 has a very, very important segment in it. So it's a good idea to look at this. So I'm going to go to screen sharing, and we'll take this from there. And, so here we go. Here we are at full screen. Chapter 21 is about blood vessels. So in the previous segment of chapter 21 lectures, you have seen two important aspects of that's going to come home to roost in this portion. So first, if you remember, microscopic layers of arteries and veins include a tunica media layer, which is rich in smooth muscles. So we can say that blood vessels have the ability to change diameter, vasodilate when the smooth muscles relax, and vasoconstrict when the smooth muscles contract. The second important information that you have seen is capillary exchange. Now, in that process, you have seen that during the filtration portion of this capillary exchange, 5 gallons of plasma fluids are squeezed out from the blood and released into the tissue space, and that fluid is carrying oxygen, nutrients to all of our cells. Very important for maintaining a well-oxygenated and well-supplied set of cells in our body. If you remember, in that filtration portion of capillary exchange, the filtration is driven by hydrostatic blood pressure. So blood pressure is absolutely essential to maintain in its homeostatic range, because blood pressure is eventually leading to the nurturing, the supplying of all our cells with oxygen and nutrients. So in this last portion of chapter 21, we are going to look at how blood pressure is maintained, kept in a homeostatic range. And also we'll be looking at the role of the smooth muscles in arteries. So in this opening slide, you're seeing blood pressure defined, and this is nothing different, no different from pressure that you detect in car tires or bicycle tires. A pressurized material is pushing out on the walls. In this case, walls of the blood vessels. In this discussion, and you'll see this in the blood pressure, or you have seen in the discussion of blood pressure in the lab as well, we are talking about blood pressure in arteries. If you have taken somebody's blood pressure, you have put on this inflatable cuff that is allowing the measurement of blood pressure on a brachial artery. In clinical practice, measuring pressures in veins is tremendously difficult. So when we say the word blood pressure, we automatically refer to pressure in arteries. And again, this is the pressure that drives that filtration portion of the capillary exchange, physiologically super important. So where is blood pressure coming from? It's very easy to see that the pumping of the left ventricle is keep moving blood into the arteries, um, and that is a major contributor to blood pressure. But then, and this is the bottom portion of this slide, refers to blood vessels can also influence blood pressure. There is a vascular resistance with a contracting smooth muscles in a blood vessels represent, and they form a systemic vascular resistance. This can be changed by the relaxation or the contraction of those smooth muscles. So it's the heart plus the blood vessels that are contributing to maintaining blood pressure. And as you'll see, most homeostatic regulation of blood pressure is using both the heart and the blood vessels. We'll be seeing this in just a few minutes. So here is this chart. I'll be referring back to this a number of times, and I'll be using this chart to point forward towards future slides here. But let's take a look at the green portion here first. This is the contribution of the heart's action to mean arterial pressure. For our sake, for sake of simplicity, we can just call this, I don't know, purplish box blood pressure. So it kind of makes sense that if the pump, the heart, is moving more blood into the blood vessels, blood pressure will increase. So increased cardiac output, I think this is a no-brainer. Imagine that the heart is a bicycle pump. How do you pump up the tire pressure? You increase the output from that pump. Going back to chapter 20, we have seen that the cardiac output comes from two components, heart rate and stroke volume. And we'll be seeing the nervous system mechanisms and also some hormonal mechanisms that indeed increase heart rate, and that will lead to increased cardiac output. Now, increased stroke volume can also come from hormones. Remember that positive inotropic agents, who could possibly forget them? Epinephrine, norepinephrine, hormones coming from adrenal medulla. But then we have this effect here, increased venous return. And this takes a little more explanation. This is referring to the increased stroke volume when we stretch the ventricles. This box represents the effect of Frank-Starling law. You can look back in that lecture slide on heart. So what would change the volume of the ventricle? What would stretch in this case, the right ventricle? And this is increased venous return. Increased volume of venous blood coming to the right ventricle. Where would this blood come from? Well, here's venoconstriction. During exercise, fight or flight response reaction, veins will constrict and they move more blood into the active circulation, increasing the blood volume coming to the right ventricle, and that will increase the stroke volume because both left and right ventricles will be responding to this increased volume. Skeletal and respiratory pump, these are the squeezing effects of skeletal muscle pumps in the leg, the squeezing effect of diaphragm muscle in at the border of the abdominal and thoracic cavity. Both of these skeletal muscles squeeze on large veins and they shove blood towards the right atrium, increasing venous return. When we exercise, our skeletal muscle pump and respiratory pump drives up venous return, and so our stroke volume increased. What looks probably most weird is this increased blood volume. This is labeled here because many of our, at least some of our hormones that modulate blood pressure is acting through this handle. Increased blood volume will be increasing venous return because more blood is flowing at first to the right and then to the left ventricle. So increased blood volume, and you'll see in a few minutes just how incredibly useful this way of increasing eventually cardiac output and therefore increasing blood pressure. So this is the hard portion. Excuse me. In the blue boxes, here's the contribution of the blood vessels. So vascular resistance, increasing this will lead to increased blood pressure. And the most frequently used physiological tool to maintain homeostasis through this mechanism is vasoconstriction. You will see this a number of times. So this is the constriction or contraction of the tunica media smooth muscles in arteries and arterioles. Now we have two other boxes here too. Let's say a few words about them. Increase total blood vessel length, because the more blood vessels we have in a body, the higher the blood pressure is. This is a true statement. Physically, this is true. This is not used to regulate blood pressure in the homeostatic range because this takes weeks to grow blood vessels. However, increased body size, such as growth of children, and also, most importantly, clinically, obesity, will contribute to increased blood pressure. So if you hear this statement that hypertension epidemic is enhanced by increased rate of obesity, it is true because in an obese individual, there are 50 to 100 to 200 pounds of adipose tissue, and each pound of adipose tissue requires 3 to 5 miles of new blood vessels. So in a 100-pound overweight individual, there are 500 miles of extra blood vessel length, and that tend to increase the blood pressure of that individual. So obesity and high blood pressure is linked through this effect, increased total blood vessel length. Increased blood viscosity, this relates to the condition polycythemia. We have mentioned this briefly in the blood chapter. There's a disorder, polycythemia vera, where hematocrit is way above the normal. It's in the 65-70% range. And a large number of formed elements, especially red blood cells, will slow down the blood flow, and the resistance will increase against the blood flow. So that contributes, again, in those pathological cases, to increased systemic vascular resistance. So from the physiological point of view that we will be reviewing, we will be looking for words like vasoconstriction. We'll be looking for words like increased venous return and increased cardiac output. So here is the contribution of our nervous system to maintaining normal blood pressure. The major challenge to maintain blood pressure is a continually dropping blood pressure. If you think about the loss of that 5-gallon plasma fluids, our capillaries can be considered leaky bicycle tires that needs to be reflated. And so that loss of blood pressure, loss of tire pressure, if you will, is the most frequent challenge. So let's see how the nervous system contributes to this. In terms of blood pressure, baroreceptors detect a dropping blood pressure and send nerve impulses to the cardiovascular center. If we have high carbon dioxide or hydrogen ion levels, those chemoreceptors also send nerve impulses to the cardiovascular center. If our body is moving and our brain makes the connection of this movement to exercise, proprioceptors are agitated, or our hypothalamus signals that we are in fight or flight response mode, whether because of exercise or embarrassment. Those nerve impulses will come to the cardiovascular center. All these nerve impulses will make the cardiovascular center send nerve impulses to the cardiac accelerator nerves, where we have increased heart rate and contractility, therefore increased cardiac output. And the nerve impulses, remember, these are circumstances where higher blood pressure is needed. Nerve impulses will also go to the vasomotor nerves. Now, vasomotor nerves are bundles of axons that carry nerve impulses to those smooth muscles in a tunica media or blood vessels. And nerve impulses will always cause muscle contraction, right? So in this case, we are creating vasoconstriction, increasing systemic resistance, increasing blood pressure. Both of these are considered sympathetic effect, fight or flight response mode. Activation of our sympathetic division of our nervous system comes with higher heart rate and increased cardiac output, and also increased blood pressure. When the need to maintain high blood pressure is removed, let's say we are no longer in fight or flight response mode, the cardiovascular center starts sending more nerve impulses through the vagus nerve. This is cranial nerve 10. This will reach the heart and causes a decreased and lower heart rate, and the heart rate is normalized, and therefore blood pressure will be normalized along the dropping cardiac output. So this is the effect of the nervous system. Think about fight or flight response mode. These changes, the regulation of blood pressure, can happen in a matter of a few seconds or a few minutes. So quick reactions to any kind of changes in a blood pressure is possible through the actions of our nervous system. On top of the nervous system's quick regulation, quick reaction, we have long-lasting, slower reactions through the endocrine system. And so the hormonal regulation, again, we'll be aiming at increasing blood pressure. Again, as I said, the dropping blood pressure is the natural challenge. We will have one outlier here. I'll explain this towards the end. So let's take a look at hormones now that increase blood pressure. And maybe I'm going to start right here in the middle, epinephrine, norepinephrine. We just mentioned fight or flight response mode. So in addition to the action of our nervous system, the adrenal medulla will be secreting epinephrine, norepinephrine into the blood. And these two hormones will contribute increased heart rate and stroke volume, right? Cardiac output is increased. And also, little known secret, now you all know this, that epinephrine, norepinephrine has receptors in those tunica media, smooth muscle cells in a blood vessel. So epinephrine increases cardiac output and increases vasoconstriction, vascular resistance. Combined effect is an increase of blood pressure. And let's move to antidiuretic hormone. This is the simplest case to explain how that venous return can increase cardiac output. So antidiuretic hormone is made by the hypothalamus. So the process here is that the hypothalamus detects, let's say, dehydration, increased osmolarity of the blood, and the hypothalamus makes more antidiuretic hormone, and the antidiuretic hormone goes to the kidney and increases water absorption from urine into the blood. So antidiuretic hormone effect is an increased blood volume. That increased blood volume is now coming to the right side of the heart, and so antidiuretic hormone causes an increased venous return. So through this water reabsorption, we are increasing cardiac output because water reabsorption from urine is causing increased blood volume and increased venous return. So here's the heart contribution under the influence of antidiuretic hormone. And those smooth muscles in the tunica media also have ADH receptors. So vasoconstriction will be caused by ADH. And again, both the heart and the blood vessels will contribute to increasing blood pressure to maintain the normal blood pressure in a homeostatic range. And the last set of hormones, this is the most complicated case, hormones increasing blood pressure. In our kidneys, there is a group of cells that detect low oxygenation, low oxygen supply. And some of those cells, in response to that low oxygenation, hypoxia conditions, will create an enzyme called renin, release it into blood. Renin in the blood will act on angiotensin and activate it into angiotensin 2. Angiotensin, as its name suggests, it's going to cause angio, contraction, tensin. So angiotensin is causing vasoconstriction when the kidneys detect low blood pressure, low tissue oxygenation, and so blood pressure will be increased from the blood vessel side. Angiotensin will also go to the adrenal cortex and stimulates the creation of aldosterone. So the aldosterone is now going to go to the kidneys, and in the kidneys, aldosterone causes sodium reabsorption, and the sodium reabsorption will be followed by water reabsorption. So using a different hormone, we achieve a very similar effect to antidiuretic hormone. We are increasing blood volume through the action of aldosterone. Increased blood volume will lead to increased venous return, and our right ventricle will respond with higher stroke volume. Therefore, in this renin-angiotensin aldosterone system, it is the aldosterone that stimulates the cardiac output. It is going to lead to increased blood pressure. Again, it was the angiotensin that caused vasoconstriction. So in this combination of hormones, we increase vasoconstriction, vascular resistance, increased blood pressure this way. And on top of it, we are increasing cardiac output because of the water reabsorption into our blood vessels. So these are the three ways a falling, decreasing blood pressure can be reversed through the action of these three sets of hormones. So let's take a look at the outlier here, atrionatriuretic peptide, or ANP. This is going to lower blood pressure. This is a hormone that is used in an emergency situation where slight modulation of the other hormones or the nervous system is not leading to the desired result, to decrease blood pressure. So imagine this situation. You are not in fight or flight response mode. You're at a summer picnic and you eat half a watermelon. That maybe 2 pints of watermelon juice will be absorbed in our bloodstream and increase blood volume. Consuming that amount of water and absorbing that amount of water will increase venous return, increase cardiac output, and increase blood pressure. That kind of blood pressure increase could be so high that the atria will be overstretched by that increased blood volume, and the atria send out a signal for help. The signal is atrionatriuretic peptide, and the message from the atria is lower blood volume or we're going to burst. So what does atrionatriuretic peptide do? It goes to the kidney and tells the kidneys allow water release into the urine. So blood volume will be decreased very quickly by allowing water to leave through the urine. If you had this experience, you ate half a watermelon, you might notice you need to visit the restrooms more frequently because we pee more as a consequence of atrionatriuretic peptide when our blood vessels or cardiovascular system is overloaded with high volume. Atrionatriuretic peptide also causes vasodilation, and vasodilation kind of gives extra room in our blood vessels for blood, so blood pressure will be lowered that way too. So atrionatriuretic peptide is, again, while it is working on lowering blood pressure, acts on blood vessels, causing vasodilation, and acts on lessening venous return to the heart and therefore lowering cardiac output. And it achieves that by allowing the kidneys to release water from the blood to the urine. If you have any questions about these nervous system or hormonal mechanisms, please don't hesitate to send me a message or ask me in person. A clinical set of conditions that we call shock is the inadequate delivery of oxygen and nutrients to the cells, and as a consequence, cells die. So here are a few scenarios. Let's consider hypovolemic shock. This is dehydration as a consequence of sweating. If you've seen baseball games played in these professional stadiums in the middle of July, some of the visitors in the audience are taken away on stretchers because they faint. They are dehydrated because of sweating or low fluid consumption, and this is hypovolemic shock. Losing blood in large amounts also causes hypovolemic shock, and therefore oxygen nutrient delivery will be hampered. Diarrhea, here's the danger of main danger of the diarrhea is causing hypovolemic shock, an inadequate delivery of oxygen nutrients to the tissues, because diarrhea, that fluid volume that we lose through diarrhea, defecation, that fluid is taken out of the blood. So in all these three cases, venous return decreases and cardiac output is lowered, and therefore blood pressure is lowered, and the delivery of oxygen nutrients through that filtration mechanism is hampered. Cardiogenic shock, here we have a defect of the pump itself, so cardiac output is directly affected, myocardial infarct, some kind of a ischemia of the heart muscle, valve problems where blood is not prevented to not prevented from going backwards, backwards, not prevented. Arrhythmias can cause major disruption in the pumping ability of the heart. We can have a vascular shock. This is unexpected and unwanted vasodilation. This could happen as a consequence of allergic reaction, this anaphylactic shock. Septic shock occurs because some bacteria release toxins that reprogram the smooth muscles of the tunica media, and those toxins tell the smooth muscles to relax. We have septic shock. And neurogenic shock, this is mostly coming from the injury of the cardiovascular center in the brainstem, and the nerve impulses that would normally go to the smooth muscles of the tunica media are no longer going out there, and therefore the blood vessels start to vasodilate. The body's response is kind of predictable. If we have hypovolemic shock or inappropriate vasodilation, moving more fluids in the blood vessels makes sense. So renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system is activated, secretion of antidiuretic hormone. If there is a malfunction of the heart muscle, or if there's a neurogenic shock, activation of sympathetic nervous system happens mostly, and therefore through the actions of our nervous system, the heart is told to beat faster and vasoconstriction is caused in the smooth muscle of our arteries. We don't talk about this a whole lot, but this is just a sideline event. Individual organs, when they have lower than normal oxygen nutrient delivery, we release local vasodilators that initially increases blood flow to these organs. Main action again here in a homeostatic response to a shock or shocks is the activation of the renin-angiotensin, antidiuretic hormone systems, and then the sympathetic division of our nervous system will be activated, which of course will be releasing epinephrine, norepinephrine, in addition to the action of the nerves themselves. So I'm going to stop here. This is the end of chapter 21, and I'm going to stop sharing here for a minute. So let's go into now chapter 22, which is lymphatic and immune system. We'll be leaving the immune portion of it to a live lecture on the Monday before the lecture exam. Here, let's take a look at how is this lymphatic system is finding its way into this cardiovascular unit. The blood, heart, blood vessels, and now with the lymphatic system, what is the connection there? And then let's ask the question and answer the question, how is it possible the lymphatic system is also linked to the immune system? So we're going to have a brief introduction here. So I'm going to switch over to chapter 22 slides, and we'll explain a few things going from there. So the introductory slide here is mostly talking about the immune system defending our bodies. And this resistance we'll explore again in Monday's lecture. We have non-specific and specific immunity. We'll deal with that on Monday. Let's talk today about the lymphatic system as an organ system. And this has a history going way, way back 150 or so years to gross anatomical discoveries in a body. So during cadaver dissection, um, anatomists noticed that there are vessels, and most of them are labeled in green here. The thickest ones are right here in the thoracic and abdominal cavity, that some vessels where anatomists cut into it, it did not release a red fluid, blood, but it released a colorless fluid, and anatomists decided to call this lymph. And when they tracked these vessels, they found that these vessels are all around the body. Some of them are thicker, some of them are thinner, and they prefer to move around a few organs, and anatomists call those lymphatic organs. You see here red bone marrow, thymus, spleen, lymph nodes. Very unusual organs because they're not connected to any other major organ systems. So this is where the gross anatomical discovery and description of a lymphatic system comes from. So unusual looking vessels that release a clear tissue fluid that looks like interstitial fluid. And these vessels are frequent around very unusual sounding organs. So what is the function of the lymphatic system? A connection back to this filtration and reabsorption of the capillary exchange that, if you remember, 5 gallons of plasma fluids are squeezed out during the filtration part of the capillary exchange, and only 4 gallons of those tissue fluids are reabsorbed into the veins. That 1 gallon per day excess interstitial fluid is taken away by the lymphatic system. So draining this daily excess interstitial fluid is a major role for the lymphatic system. In the digestive system, we'll see this unusual aspect that dietary lipids and lipid-soluble vitamins are absorbed into the lymphatic system and not into the blood, at least initially. We'll talk about that in the digestive system chapter more detail. And in Monday's lecture, we will be exploring this immune response, just how the lymphatic system is actually related to immune response. So first, the gross anatomical portion. And this is a great illustration here. Here's our capillary bed. You see the arterial and the venule side of the capillary bed, capillaries in purple in between. So this is the space where we have 1 gallon of excess fluid accumulating every day. And here are the lymphatic capillaries to the rescue. When you look at in higher magnification, lymphatic capillaries are tremendously able to accept pressurized fluid. So let's say fluid pressure is building up here in between cells. That pressure will be push this shingle-looking cell towards the inside of the lymphatic vessel, and you can see that excess tissue fluid can just scoot right in there. So this enables the lymphatic capillaries to absorb large particles, sometimes even cells, because these barn doors, these green doors, will open wide as long as the pressure is high from the outside. And so lymphatic vessels will take away not only interstitial fluid, but some proteins, some lipids, and sometimes even entire cells. So this is where the drainage functions start, right here in the capillary bed. Those lymphatic capillaries keep merging into larger vessels. We are not going to go into the intermediary anatomy here, We are going to focus on these vessels here. So both on the right side and the left side, lymphatic capillaries merge into a single large vessel. On the left side, this is called the thoracic duct, and it brings lymph back to the venous circulation. This is subclavian vein. This is where the lymph merges with venous blood. And on the right side, we have the right lymphatic duct. And this, again, this green vessel is bringing lymph back to the venous circulation now, to the right subclavian artery. I'm sorry, right subclavian vein. So this is the end of the flow of the lymph. Again, we are not concerning ourselves with lymphatic flow in between and those gross anatomical structures. So this is where lymphatic flow ends. Lymph is now becoming part of the blood. Here's the scheme here. Again, here you see the heart. There's no connection between the heart and individual lymphatic vessels, but you do see that lymph is collected in the capillary beds. And if you look close enough, you can observe valves within the lymphatic vessels, just like the veins needed help from valves here and there. Lymphatic vessels can also make the flow of lymph one directional, preventing backflow by the placement of valves into the lymphatic vessel. This is the artistic rendition of the merger of the right lymphatic duct and thoracic duct with the subclavian vein. So lymph eventually will merge with deoxygenated blood. And let's say a few words about lymphatic organs and tissues. Here is where anatomists found illustrations that, wow, this lymphatic system has something to do with defense of our cells. Because take a look at the primary lymphatic organs. This is where the cells, the lymphocytes, and I hope you notice the similarity between lymphatic organs, lymphatic system, and lymphocytes. So lymphocytes that are generated and trained in the lymphatic organs, red bone marrow, it is making all lymphocytes, but it's training a set of lymphocytes. These are called B lymphocytes or B cells. The thymus, another unusual organ, is where a group of lymphocytes trained to be T cells or T lymphocytes. So these are the primary lymphatic organs, very unusual situation. The fighters of our immune system, the B cells and T cells are being trained in these primary lymphatic organs. So here's the first illustration that lymphatic organs have something to do with the defense of our bodies. Now, we do have secondary lymphatic organs. This is where the immune reaction is amplified, and we'll see this in Monday's lecture, amplified and expanded. So these secondary lymphatic organs are lymph nodes, spleen, lymphatic clumps of tissue in tonsils, appendix, small intestine, and some other mucous membrane. A very brief look in the thymus. This is where T cells, T lymphocytes are trained. This training is called maturation, and we need to provide the best fighters for our body. This is what this training, this is what this maturation is all about. You can see the thymus here, these orangish looking structures. In an infant, the thymus is relatively large, roughly about this size. In the adult, it's barely visible, and this organ shrivels as we age, as we grow from infancy into childhood. Inside the thymus, we have lymphocytes and macrophages. Macrophages, you'll see in the next few organs, very essential to alert lymphocytes if the body needs specific defenses, and macrophages are also essential to train lymphocytes. So inside the thymus, we find not only lymphocytes, but also macrophages. The lymph nodes themselves are also places where the immune response is expanded. Again, take a look at the composition here. We have B cells, B lymphocytes, plus macrophages. And in some other portions of the lymph node, we have T lymphocytes. Dendritic cells are also cells, just like macrophages, that can alert the fighters of our immune system, the B and T cells, to jump into the fight that our body is being attacked. Looking into a lymph node, you can see the incoming lymph very slowly flowing into the lymph node, and the efferent lymphatic vessels allow lymph to flow out. While inside a lymph node, individual cells, tissue debris can make contact with the cells inside the lymph node, and macrophages will be digesting, clearing them out. But the macrophages, through this digestive action, will be alerting the lymphocytes if there's a foreign invader in the body. So macrophages paired with lymphocytes are very, very effective starting points to our immune response. We'll be detailing that in Monday's lecture. A clinical connection here about lymph nodes. In many cancer diagnostics and staging, lymph nodes are removed from this cancer patient, and chemical microscopic analysis is looking for cancer cells in lymph nodes. If lymph nodes have cancer cells in them, it means that the initial cancer started to spread in the body, a very different stage, and a very different treatment regimen might come out from that result. So lymph nodes are important tools in identifying how far a particular cancer has spread. And the spleen here is the last organ that we'll talk about. Again, we have macrophages and lymphocytes mixed together here in clumps. Of course, we mentioned the spleen as a site of recycling of red blood cells. Different compartments of the spleen carry out that recycling activity, and the lymphatic tissue with lymphocytes and macrophages are reserved to other small clumps inside the spleen. And so this is how much I want to say today, and I'm going to stop sharing here. This is all coming to you in Monday's lecture. So thank you for listening to the end of chapter 21 and chapter 22. Again, over the weekend, please review these. It'll be helpful for you to complete chapter quizzes, and also helpful to pick up the pace in that Monday's lecture, where we'll talk a great deal about the workings of our immune system. So I'm going to stop here, and please let me know if you have any questions about the content of this recording.